The dusty window of the two-story house reflected the setting sun like a mirror of fire, and Clara Lawson pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the moneylender's buggy disappear down the rutted main street of White Pine, Nevada, knowing she had exactly 7 days before he returned to take everything her dead husband had left her. Her hands trembled as she clutched the notice Silas Pemberton had delivered just an hour ago, the bold black letters swimming before her eyes. $300. The amount might as well have been $3,000 for all the hope she had of scraping it together. Her husband Thomas had been dead for 8 months now, killed in a mining accident up in the hills, and the loan he had taken to expand their small ranch had come due with interest that seemed to multiply like jackrabbits in spring. Clara moved away from the window and sank into the worn chair by the fireplace, the same chair where Thomas used to sit and read the newspaper on quiet evenings. She was 24 years old, and already a widow trying to hold on to the only home she had ever known since coming west from Missouri 5 years ago. The ranch was small, just 40 acres with a modest house, a barn that needed repairs, and a handful of cattle that barely kept her fed. But it was hers, or at least it had been until this afternoon. Silas Pemberton had smiled when he delivered the notice, his thin lips stretching across his teeth like a snake preparing to strike. He had made it clear that if she could not pay, he would accept the deed to the property as settlement. He had also made it clear, in words that made her skin crawl, that there might be other arrangements a young widow could make. Clara had shown him the door before he could finish that particular thought. Now, as darkness crept across the valley and the first stars appeared in the Nevada sky, Clara tried to think of anyone who might help her. Her parents were dead. Thomas had been an only child. The few friends she had made in White Pine were struggling themselves, miners and farmers barely scraping by in this unforgiving landscape. The silver boom had brought prosperity to some parts of Nevada, but White Pine remained a hardscrabble town, where most folks counted themselves lucky if they made it through winter with food in their bellies. She had 7 days. 7 days to find $300 or lose everything. The knock on her door came just after dawn the next morning. Clara had barely slept, tossing and turning on sheets that still sometimes smelled like Thomas if she buried her face deep enough into the pillow. She pulled on her robe and descended the stairs, her bare feet cold on the wooden floor. When she opened the door, she found herself looking up at a tall man in dusty trail clothes, his hat in his hands. He had dark hair that needed cutting, a strong jaw shadowed with several days of stubble, and eyes the color of weathered denim. A horse stood behind him, a magnificent gray stallion that looked like it had been ridden hard. "Madam," the stranger said, his voice deep and respectful. "I apologize for the early hour. My name is Nathan Olsen. My horse threw a shoe about a mile back, and I was wondering if you might know where I could find a blacksmith." Clara pulled her robe tighter around herself, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance. "The blacksmith is Jim Crawford. His shop is on the south end of town, near the livery stable. You cannot miss it." Nathan Olsen nodded, but he did not move to leave. His eyes had caught on something, and Clara realized he was looking past her into the house, where the notice from Silas Pemberton still lay on the small table by the door. She had been reading it again at first light, torturing herself with the impossible numbers. "Forgive me for being forward, madam, but I could not help but notice that paper. Is everything all right?" Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. It was not proper for her to discuss her troubles with a stranger, particularly one who looked like he had been living rough for some time. But there was something in his eyes, a genuine concern that made her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "I am fine," she said, but her voice cracked on the words, betraying her. Nathan shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable, but unwilling to simply walk away. "Madam, I do not mean to pry, but I have been traveling for a long time, and I have learned to recognize trouble when I see it. If there is anything I might do to help—" "You cannot help me," Clara said, more sharply than she intended. "No one can. Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do." She started to close the door, but Nathan spoke again, his voice gentle. "Is it money trouble?" Clara froze. She should have slammed the door in his face. She should have told him to mind his own business and get off her property. Instead, she found herself nodding, tears suddenly spilling down her cheeks despite her best efforts to hold them back. "I am going to lose my home," she whispered. "The moneylender is coming back in 7 days, and if I cannot pay him $300, he is taking the deed." Nathan's jaw tightened, and something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Silas Pemberton? Clara looked up in surprise. You know him? I know of him. I have heard stories up in Virginia City. He is known for preying on widows and desperate folks, taking property for a fraction of its worth, and then selling it for profit. Nathan stepped closer, and Clara caught the scent of leather and sage and something else, something clean and masculine that made her pulse quicken. Madam, I know we just met, and you have no reason to trust me, but I would like to help you if you will let me. Why? Clara asked, searching his face for any sign of the same predatory interest she had seen in Pemberton's eyes. She found none, only a steady determination that made her want to believe him. Why would you help a stranger? Nathan was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. My mother was widowed when I was 15. A man like Pemberton came calling with papers and promises, and by the time we understood what was happening, she had lost everything my father had built. She died that winter, broken and cold, in a charity house in Kansas. He focused on Clara again, and she saw old pain in his eyes, tempered by years but never forgotten. I swore that if I ever had the chance to help someone in a similar situation, I would do it. So I am asking you, Mrs. Lawson, to let me help. Clara stared at him, her heart pounding. It was madness to trust a stranger, especially one who claimed he could simply produce $300. That was more money than most men in White Pine saw in a year. I do not even know you, and even if I did, I could not possibly accept such a sum. I would have no way to repay you. I am not asking for repayment, Nathan said. I am asking to help. No one helps without expecting something in return, Clara said, her voice hardening. She had learned that lesson well in the months since Thomas died. What do you want, Mr. Olsen? Because if it is what Pemberton suggested, you can leave right now. Nathan's face flushed with anger, but Clara could see it was not directed at her. I want nothing from you except the satisfaction of knowing that Snake Pemberton did not get another family's home. That is all, Mrs. Lawson. I give you my word. They stood there in the doorway, the morning sun climbing higher and warming the air, while Clara tried to decide if she was looking at a miracle or another kind of trap. Everything in her experience told her to be suspicious, to protect herself, to not believe in fairy tales where mysterious strangers appeared to solve all her problems. But there was something about Nathan Olsen that felt honest, something in the set of his shoulders and the directness of his gaze that made her want to take a leap of faith. Come inside, she finally said, stepping back from the door. We should discuss this properly. Nathan followed her into the small house, removing his boots at the door without being asked. Clara appreciated the gesture. She led him to the kitchen and started making coffee, needing something to do with her hands while her mind raced. You said you were passing through, Clara said as she worked. Where are you headed? Nowhere in particular, Nathan replied. He sat at the kitchen table, his hands resting on the worn wood. I have been drifting for the past few years, working cattle drives, doing ranch work, whatever needs doing, saved most of what I earned. $300 is a lot of savings, Clara said carefully. I have been careful with my money, and I had a good run of luck in a poker game up in Virginia City last month. Nathan smiled slightly, and Clara saw how it transformed his face, making him look younger and less careworn. I am not rich by any means, but I have enough to help you and still have something left to get me down the trail. Clara poured the coffee and sat across from him, studying his face in the morning light that streamed through the kitchen window. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30, with the kind of weathered tan that came from years of outdoor work. His hands were calloused and scarred, working hands that had seen hard labor. But his eyes were intelligent and kind, and Clara found herself wanting to trust him, despite every warning her practical mind was screaming. Why are you really doing this? She asked quietly. The truth, Mr. Olsen. Nathan took a sip of his coffee before answering. The truth is that I am tired of drifting. Tired of seeing good people get crushed by men like Pemberton. Tired of feeling like my life does not matter beyond the next job or the next town. He met her eyes directly. My mother made me promise before she died that I would do something meaningful with my life, that I would not let bitterness turn me into the kind of man who looks away when someone needs help. I have broken a lot of promises over the years, but not that one. So, when I saw that notice in your doorway, it felt like maybe this was why I ended up in White Pine. Clara felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. I do not know what to say. Say yes, Nathan replied simply. Let me pay off the loan. Let me help you keep your home. And then what? You just ride away? Nathan hesitated, and Clara saw something flicker in his expression. If that is what you want, then yes, I will ride away. But I was thinking that maybe I could stick around for a while. Your barn needs work, and I noticed some fence posts that need replacing. If you would allow it, I could do some repairs in exchange for meals and a place to sleep, just until I figure out where I am headed next. It was too much, too fast, and Clara knew she should take more time to think about it. But time was exactly what she did not have. In 7 days, Silas Pemberton would return, and if she did not have the money, he would take everything. At least with Nathan's help, she could keep her home. The rest, whatever it might be, she could figure out later. "All right," she said, the word coming out barely louder than a whisper. "All right, Mr. Olsen, I accept your help." Nathan's face broke into a genuine smile, and Clara felt her breath catch. "Nathan," he said. "Please, call me Nathan." "Nathan," Clara repeated, and found herself smiling back. "And you should call me Clara." They spent the rest of that morning working out the details. Nathan would need to go to the bank and withdraw the money, then accompany Clara when Pemberton returned to ensure the transaction was handled properly. In the meantime, he would set up in the small room above the barn, which had served as quarters for ranch hands when Thomas was alive, and had grand plans for expanding the operation. As the days passed, Clara found herself growing used to Nathan's presence on the ranch. He was a man of his word, rising early each morning to tackle the repairs he had mentioned. He fixed the barn roof, replaced rotted fence posts, and even managed to coax the old water pump back to life. Clara watched him work from the kitchen window, admiring the easy competence with which he handled tools and the gentle way he treated the animals. In the evenings, they would share dinner at the kitchen table, and Clara found Nathan to be an easy conversationalist. He told her stories of his travels, of cattle drives through Montana and ranch work in Colorado, of the various characters he had met on the trail. In turn, Clara found herself opening up about her life with Thomas, about how they had met in Missouri and decided to head west in search of opportunity, about the dreams they had shared for the ranch. "He sounds like he was a good man," Nathan said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "He was," Clara agreed, surprised to find that talking about Thomas did not hurt quite as much as it had even a week ago. "We had 5 good years together. I just wish we had more time." Nathan nodded, his expression understanding. "It is hard to lose someone you love. My father died when I was young, and I still think about him sometimes, wondering what he would think of the man I became." "I think he would be proud," Clara said softly. "You are honoring his memory and your mother's by helping people." Nathan turned to look at her, and in the fading light, his eyes looked almost black. "You are the first person who has made me feel like maybe I am doing something right." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Clara was not quite ready to name. She looked away first, her heart beating too fast, her palms suddenly damp. It was too soon, she told herself. Thomas had only been dead 8 months. It was not proper to feel this way about another man, especially one who would be leaving soon, but the feeling did not go away, no matter how much she tried to ignore it. The 6th day arrived with a tension that made Clara's stomach twist into knots. Tomorrow, Silas Pemberton would return, and everything would be decided. Nathan had gone to the bank that morning and returned with the money in a leather pouch, $300 in bills and coins that represented more wealth than Clara had ever seen in one place. "Are you certain about this?" she asked him, for what must have been the 10th time. "Nathan, this is your life savings. Once you give it to Pemberton, there is no taking it back." "I am certain," Nathan said firmly. He was standing close to her in the kitchen, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes. "Clara, I need you to stop worrying about me and start thinking about yourself. Tomorrow, this will all be over. You will own your home free and clear, and you can start rebuilding your life." "What about your life?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happens to you after tomorrow?" Nathan reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering for just a moment. "I will figure that out. I always do." That night, Clara lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind too full of thoughts to allow sleep. She kept thinking about Nathan in the barn, about how natural it had felt to have him around, about how the house did not seem quite so empty anymore with him nearby. She thought about the way he smiled at her, the the way he listened when she talked, the way he had stepped in to save her home without expecting anything in return. She thought about the fact that he would be leaving soon, and the realization hit her like a physical blow. She did not want him to go. Somewhere in the past 6 days, Nathan Olsen had become more than just a helpful stranger. He had become someone Clara looked forward to seeing each morning, someone whose presence made her days brighter and her burdens lighter. He had become, she realized with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, someone she could imagine building a new life with. But it was too soon, and he had never given any indication that he wanted to stay beyond the immediate future. He had been honest from the beginning. He was a drifter, a man who did not put down roots. Just because he had helped her did not mean he had any interest in her beyond basic human kindness. Clara rolled onto her side, hugging her pillow, and tried not to think about how empty the ranch would feel once Nathan was gone. Morning came too quickly and too slowly all at once. Clara dressed carefully in her best dress, a dark blue cotton that Thomas had always said brought out her eyes. She braided her hair and pinned it up, then stared at herself in the mirror, trying to see what Nathan might see when he looked at her. A widow, still young but marked by loss and hardship, trying to hold on to a failing ranch in the middle of nowhere. Why would a man like Nathan, who could go anywhere and do anything, want to stay with her? She pushed the thought aside and went downstairs to find Nathan already waiting, dressed in clean clothes with his hair combed back. He looked different, almost civilized, and Clara felt her heart skip a beat. "You look beautiful," Nathan said, and the sincerity in his voice made Clara's cheeks flush. "Thank you," she managed. "You look very presentable yourself." They shared a nervous breakfast, neither of them eating much, and then Nathan went to retrieve the money while Clara gathered up all the papers related to the loan. By the time Silas Pemberton's buggy appeared on the road, they were both standing on the porch, united in their determination to see this through. Pemberton climbed down from his buggy with his usual oily smile, a leather briefcase under his arm. He was a small man with thinning hair and expensive clothes that seemed out of place in White Pine's dusty streets. His eyes narrowed when he saw Nathan standing beside Clara. "Mrs. Lawson," Pemberton said, his voice smooth as silk and just as cold, "I see you have a visitor. I do hope he is not here to cause any trouble regarding our business arrangement." "No trouble at all, Mr. Pemberton," Clara said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "In fact, I am prepared to settle the debt in full today." Pemberton's smile faltered for just a moment, revealing the predator beneath. "Is that so? I confess I did not expect you to raise such a sum on short notice. Might I ask where you obtained the money?" "That is none of your concern," Nathan said, his voice hard as iron. "The lady is prepared to pay her debt. All we need from you is a receipt and the return of the mortgage papers, properly marked as paid in full." Pemberton's eyes flickered to Nathan, assessing and clearly not liking what he saw. "And who might you be, sir?" "A friend of Mrs. Lawson's," Nathan replied. "A friend who is very interested in making sure this transaction is handled properly and legally." The tension on the porch was thick enough to cut with a knife. Pemberton looked between them, clearly trying to figure out what was happening and how he might still turn the situation to his advantage. Finally, he shrugged and opened his briefcase. "Very well. The total amount due, including interest, is $300. Do you have the money, Mrs. Lawson?" Nathan stepped forward and placed the leather pouch on the small table Clara had brought out for this purpose. "Count it," he said. "You will find it is all there." Pemberton counted the money slowly, his fingers moving over each bill and coin, as if searching for some flaw that would allow him to reject the payment. But Nathan had been thorough, and the amount was exact down to the last cent. Finally, Pemberton sighed and pulled out the mortgage papers. "I will need to make a notation and sign it," he said. "It will take just a moment." They waited in silence while Pemberton wrote out the receipt and marked the mortgage as paid in full. Clara held her breath, half expecting him to produce some hidden clause or additional fee. But Nathan's presence seemed to have convinced him that such tricks would not work today. When Pemberton handed over the papers, Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mrs. Lawson," Pemberton said, his voice dripping with false pleasantry. "Though I confess I am disappointed we could not come to a more mutually beneficial arrangement." "Get off my property," Clara said, her voice shaking with emotion. "And do not come back." Pemberton's face darkened, but he climbed back into his buggy without another word. They watched him drive away, the dust from his wheels hanging in the morning air like a bad memory slowly fading. The moment the buggy disappeared from view, Clara's legs gave out. Nathan caught her, his strong arms supporting her weight, and she found herself sobbing against his chest, all the fear and stress of the past weeks pouring out of her in great shuddering waves. "It is all right," Nathan murmured, his hand stroking her back. "You are safe now. He cannot hurt you anymore." Clara clung to him, breathing in his scent, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers. When she finally pulled back, wiping at her eyes, she saw that Nathan was looking at her with an expression that made her heart race. "Thank you," she whispered. "Nathan, I do not know how I can ever repay you." "You do not have to repay me," Nathan said softly. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. "Clara, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" Nathan took a deep breath, as if steeling himself. "When I first knocked on your door last week, I was just passing through. I had no plan to stay, no reason to put down roots. But these past few days, being here with you, helping you, talking with you, I have started to feel something I have not felt in a long time." Clara's breath caught. "What do you feel?" "Like maybe I found a reason to stop drifting," Nathan said, his eyes searching hers. "Like maybe I found a place where I could belong, but only if you want me to stay. If you do not, if this is too fast or too much, I will understand. I will leave today, and you will never have to see me again. But if there is even a chance that you might want me here, that you might want to see where this could go, then I am asking you to let me stay." Clara felt as if her heart might burst. She had spent the past night convincing herself that Nathan would leave, that she should not hope for more than his temporary help. Now he was standing here, offering her something she had not dared to dream about. A second chance, a new beginning, a future that might include the possibility of love. "I want you to stay," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Nathan, I have been terrified of you leaving. These past few days, you have made me remember what it feels like to be happy, to look forward to tomorrow. I know it is soon, and I know Thomas has not been gone long, but I cannot help what I feel, and what I feel is that I want you to stay." Nathan's face broke into a brilliant smile, and then he was kissing her, his lips warm and gentle against hers. Clara melted into the kiss, her arms wrapping around his neck, feeling like she was coming home after a long journey. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to do right by you," he promised. "I am going to work hard and help you build this ranch into something special. And when enough time has passed, when you are ready, I am going to marry you, Clara Lawson." "Nathan Olsen," Clara said, laughing through her tears. "I think that sounds like the best plan I have ever heard." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Clara's life. Nathan threw himself into improving the ranch with an energy and dedication that left her breathless. He repaired the barn completely, built new fencing, and even managed to negotiate a good price on additional cattle from a rancher passing through on his way to California. Clara, in turn, focused on making the house a home again, planting a vegetable garden, mending curtains, and cooking meals that filled the kitchen with warmth and wonderful smells. They worked together during the days and spent their evenings on the porch, talking about their dreams for the future. Nathan wanted to expand the cattle operation and maybe start breeding horses. Clara wanted to fix up the house properly, maybe add another room or two. They both wanted to prove that two people who had been knocked down by life could get back up and build something beautiful together. As summer turned to fall, the ranch began to transform. The cattle were healthy and multiplying, the buildings stood straight and strong, and the land itself seemed to respond to their care and attention. Nathan proved to be an excellent rancher, with an intuitive understanding of livestock and land management that surprised even the old-timers in White Pine. Clara watched him work, admiring not just his physical strength, but his patience and kindness. He was gentle with the animals, fair in his dealings with other ranchers, and unfailingly respectful toward her. He never pushed her for more than she was ready to give, content to let their relationship develop at its own pace. But as the months passed and the anniversary of Thomas's death came and went, Clara found herself ready for more. She had mourned her first husband properly, had made peace with his death and the life they would never have together. Now she was ready to embrace the future, and that future included Nathan. It was a cold evening in late October when Clara finally told Nathan what was in her heart. They were sitting by the fireplace, Nathan repairing a bridle while Clara mended one of his shirts. The domesticity of the scene made Clara smile, thinking about how natural it had all become. "Nathan," she said, setting down her sewing, "I have been thinking about what you said that day after Pemberton left, about marrying me when I was ready." Nathan's hands stilled on the leather, his eyes lifting to meet hers. "Yes, I am ready," Clara said simply. "I love you, Nathan. I think I have loved you since the moment you offered to help me, but it has taken me this long to accept it and to feel right about moving forward. I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up every morning knowing that you are mine and I am yours." Nathan set aside the bridle and crossed the room to her, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "Clara," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "you have no idea how long I have been hoping to hear you say those words. I love you too. I have loved you since I saw you standing in that doorway, brave and beautiful and refusing to give up. You are the strongest person I have ever met, and I want nothing more than to spend the rest of my life with you." He kissed her then, a deep, passionate kiss that left no doubt about his feelings. When they finally broke apart, Clara was breathless and smiling, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. "Should we go to town tomorrow and talk to the preacher?" she asked. "We should," Nathan agreed. "Though I warn you, I do not have money for a fancy wedding. I spent most of my savings on your loan, remember?" Clara laughed, a bright, joyful sound that filled the room. "I do not need a fancy wedding. I just need you, standing beside me, promising to love me for the rest of our lives." "That," Nathan said, kissing her forehead, "I can definitely do." They were married the following week in a simple ceremony at the small church in White Pine. Clara wore the dress she had been married in the first time, but she had altered it with new lace and ribbons, making it feel fresh and appropriate for this new beginning. Nathan wore his best suit, purchased specially for the occasion, with money earned from selling some of the cattle. The ceremony was attended by a handful of their neighbors, people who had watched Clara struggle through widowhood, and who seemed genuinely happy to see her finding love again. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief throughout the entire service. Jim Crawford, the blacksmith who had shod Nathan's horse that first day, stood as Nathan's witness, while Mrs. Henderson's daughter Rose stood up for Clara. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Nathan kissed Clara with a tenderness that made her knees weak. She was a married woman again, but this time it felt different. With Thomas she had been young and naive, full of dreams but uncertain about the future. With Nathan she was older and wiser, scarred by loss but stronger for it. She knew what she wanted now, and what she wanted was standing right beside her, holding her hand like he would never let go. They celebrated with a small dinner at the boarding house, Mrs. Henderson having insisted on preparing a special meal for the occasion. There was roasted chicken and potatoes, fresh bread and butter, and even a cake that Rose had decorated with dried flowers. It was simple but perfect, exactly what Clara had hoped for. As the evening drew to a close and they prepared to head back to the ranch, Jim Crawford pulled Nathan aside. Clara watched from across the room as the two men spoke quietly, Jim's weathered face serious. Nathan nodded several times, then shook Jim's hand firmly before returning to Clara's side. "What was that about?" Clara asked as they climbed into the wagon Nathan had borrowed for the occasion. "Jim was telling me that Silas Pemberton has been spreading rumors around town," Nathan said, his jaw tight, "saying that I took advantage of you, that I bought your ranch through trickery or worse." Clara felt anger flare in her chest. "That is ridiculous. Everyone knows what really happened." "Most people do," Nathan agreed. "But Pemberton has influence in some circles, and he does not like that we made him look foolish. Jim was just warning me to be careful, to watch out for any attempts at revenge." "Do you think he would try something?" Clara asked, worried now. Nathan put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close as he guided the horses toward home. "I think Pemberton is a coward who only picks on people he thinks cannot fight back. Now that you have someone standing with you, he will move on to easier targets, but I will keep my eyes open, just to be safe." They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence. Clara nestled against Nathan's side, feeling safer than she had in a long time. When they reached the ranch, Nathan helped her down from the wagon and then, to her surprise, swept her up into his arms. "What are you doing?" Clara laughed, holding onto his neck. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," Nathan said with a grin. "It is tradition, is it not?" I have already been carried over this threshold once, Clara pointed out, but she was smiling. Then consider this a new beginning, Nathan said, and carried her through the door into their home. That night, as Clara lay in Nathan's arms in the bed she had once shared with Thomas, she felt at peace. She had honored her first husband's memory, while also allowing herself to move forward into a new chapter of her life. Thomas would have wanted her to be happy, she knew. He would have liked Nathan, would have appreciated his strength and integrity. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, his voice soft in the darkness. "About how lucky I am," Clara said honestly. "I thought my life was over when Thomas died. I thought the best years were behind me, but here I am, married to a wonderful man, with a thriving ranch and a future full of possibilities. It feels like a miracle." "You are my miracle," Nathan said, kissing the top of her head. "I was drifting before I met you, Clara. I had no purpose, no real direction. You gave me a reason to stop running and start building. I should be thanking you." "Then let us thank each other," Clara said, turning in his arms to kiss him. "And let us promise to never take this for granted, to work together through whatever challenges come our way." "I promise," Nathan said solemnly. "For better or worse, through good times and bad, I am yours, Clara Olson." "And I am yours," Clara echoed, loving the sound of her new name. "Always." The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. The ranch continued to grow and prosper under Nathan's management and Clara's careful stewardship of their resources. They weathered harsh winters and dry summers, cattle sickness and market fluctuations, but they faced each challenge together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. In the spring of 1878, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She had begun to wonder if perhaps she would never have children, if the years with Thomas without conceiving meant she was barren. But Nathan's joy when she told him the news erased any lingering doubts or fears. "A baby," he kept saying, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "Clara, we are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Clara asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Nathan said, pulling her into a careful embrace. "I am over the moon. I am walking on air. I am the luckiest man in Nevada." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Clara continued working around the ranch for as long as Nathan would let her. He became increasingly protective as the months went by, insisting that she rest more and work less. Clara found his concern endearing, even when it became a bit overbearing. "Nathan, I am pregnant, not fragile," she said one afternoon when he tried to take a basket of laundry from her hands. "Women have been doing chores while pregnant since the beginning of time." "But none of those women were carrying my child," Nathan said stubbornly. "Let me help you, Clara, please." She could not resist when he asked like that, his eyes soft with love and worry. So she let him carry the laundry and fetch the water and do a dozen other small tasks that she was perfectly capable of handling herself. It made him feel useful, and it reminded her every day how much he cared. Their son was born on a snowy December morning, arriving with a lusty cry that made both parents laugh through their tears. They named him Thomas Nathan Olsen, honoring both the man who had first claimed Clara's heart and the man who had saved her when she needed it most. Nathan held his son with a reverence that made Clara's heart swell. He was a natural father, patient and gentle, marveling at every tiny finger and toe. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered, his eyes shining. "Clara, he is absolutely perfect." "He is," Clara agreed, exhausted but happy beyond measure. "And he is going to have a wonderful father." As little Thomas grew from an infant into a toddler, the ranch continued to flourish. Nathan hired a couple of ranch hands to help with the increased workload, good men who treated Clara with respect and Nathan with loyalty. The house was expanded to include 2 additional bedrooms, one for Thomas and one for the children Clara and Nathan hoped would follow. Those hopes were realized in 1880 when Clara gave birth to twin daughters, Emma and Grace. The girls had their father's dark hair and their mother's green eyes, and they ruled the household from the moment they arrived. Nathan, who had been wonderful with one child, was utterly helpless in the face of 2. Clara would often find him sitting on the floor of the nursery with a baby on each arm, singing soft lullabies in his deep voice while Thomas played nearby with his wooden horses. Life was full and rich and occasionally chaotic, but Clara would not have changed a single thing. The ranch was thriving, her children were healthy, and her marriage to Nathan grew deeper and stronger with each passing year. They had built something real together, something lasting, and every time Clara looked around at their home and their family, she felt grateful beyond words. One evening in the summer of 1882, Clara and Nathan sat on the porch after putting the children to bed. Thomas was 4 now, a miniature version of his father, with his serious eyes and gentle nature. The twins were 2, already showing distinct personalities. Emma was bold and adventurous, while Grace was quieter and more thoughtful. "Do you ever think about that day I showed up at your door?" Nathan asked, his arm around Clara's shoulders as they watched the sun set over the mountains. "All the time," Clara admitted. "I think about how close I came to losing everything, and how one stranger's kindness changed my entire life." "You changed my life too," Nathan said. "I was lost before I met you, Clara. I had given up on the idea of having a home and a family. I thought I was meant to drift forever, never putting down roots, but you showed me what was possible. You gave me everything I did not even know I wanted." Clara turned to look at him, seeing the love shining in his eyes. "We saved each other," she said softly. "You saved my home, but I think maybe I saved you too." "You definitely did," Nathan agreed. He kissed her gently, a kiss that held 6 years of love and partnership and shared dreams. "I love you, Clara Olson, more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," Clara said, resting her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for being exactly who you are. Thank you for staying." "Where else would I go?" Nathan asked with a smile. "This is home. You are home. This is where I belong." They sat together in the gathering darkness, listening to the sounds of their ranch settling down for the night. The cattle lowing in the distance, the horses shifting in the barn, the crickets beginning their evening song. Inside the house, their children slept safely, their dreams undisturbed. Clara thought about the woman she had been that day when Silas Pemberton had delivered his notice, desperate and alone, and certain her life was over. She thought about the man who had knocked on her door looking for a blacksmith and had ended up saving her in more ways than one. She thought about the journey they had taken together, from strangers to friends to lovers to spouses to parents. It had not been an easy road. They had faced challenges and setbacks, moments of doubt and periods of struggle, but they had faced everything together, their love and commitment to each other never wavering. And now, years later, they had built something beautiful, a thriving ranch, a loving family, a life full of purpose and meaning. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Nathan stood and offered Clara his hand. "Come on, Mrs. Olsen, let us go to bed. Tomorrow is going to be another long day." Clara took his hand and let him pull her to her feet, smiling at the familiar gesture. "Tomorrow is always a long day on a ranch." "True," Nathan agreed, "but at least we face those long days together." "Together," Clara echoed, and hand in hand, they walked into their home, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing new joys and new challenges. In 1884, Clara gave birth to another son, whom they named Samuel. He had Nathan's eyes and Clara's quick smile, and he completed their family in a way neither of them had quite expected. The ranch expanded further, as Nathan's reputation as a fair dealer and excellent cattleman spread throughout the region. They were able to purchase an additional 40 acres from a neighbor who was retiring and moving back east, doubling the size of their operation. Nathan hired more hands, including a young man named Peter, who showed real promise and who Nathan began training to eventually take over day-to-day operations. Clara, meanwhile, had become known in White Pine as someone who could be counted on to help others in need. She never forgot what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and whenever she heard of someone struggling, she found ways to assist. Sometimes it was a meal brought to a sick neighbor. Sometimes it was caring for children while their parents dealt with a crisis. Sometimes it was simply a listening ear and words of encouragement. "You are going to wear yourself out," Nathan warned her one evening after she had spent the day helping Mrs. Henderson, whose health was declining. "I am fine," Clara assured him. "These people helped me when I needed it. The least I can do is return the favor." "They helped you because I paid Pemberton," Nathan pointed out gently. "No, they helped me because this is what neighbors do," Clara corrected. "You paying Pemberton meant I kept my home, but the people of White Pine have shown me kindness in 100 other ways. I am just doing my part." Nathan pulled her close, kissing her temple. "You have such a good heart. It is one of the million reasons I love you." Their children grew healthy and strong, each developing their own interests and personalities. Thomas showed an early aptitude for working with animals, often following Nathan around the ranch and asking endless questions about cattle and horses. The twins were inseparable, conducting their own adventures and frequently getting into harmless mischief. Samuel was still too young to show much beyond a general delight in everything around him. The only shadow over their happiness came in 1886, when word reached them that Silas Pemberton had been arrested for fraud and extortion. Apparently, his schemes had finally caught up with him, and he was facing serious charges. Nathan and Clara were called to testify at his trial, along with several other people he had victimized over the years. Standing in the courtroom and facing Pemberton across the room was harder than Clara had expected. She had not seen him since that day 8 years ago, when Nathan had paid off her loan, and she had almost forgotten how much she had feared this man. But as she told her story to the judge and jury, describing how Pemberton had tried to take her home and had even suggested she might offer other forms of payment, she felt not fear, but anger on behalf of all the people he had hurt. Nathan's testimony was brief but powerful. He described arriving in White Pine and learning of Pemberton's reputation, then paying off Clara's loan to prevent her from becoming another victim. He produced the receipt and mortgage papers, all properly signed and dated, proving that Clara's debt had been legitimately satisfied. In the end, Pemberton was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 10 years in prison. As he was led away, he looked at Clara and Nathan with pure hatred in his eyes, but Clara felt only pity. He had spent his life taking from others, and now he had nothing. "Good riddance," Nathan said as they left the courthouse. "That is one threat that will not be bothering anyone for a long time." "I almost feel sorry for him," Clara admitted. "What a sad, empty life he must have led." "You are too kind," Nathan said, but he was smiling. "That is why I love you, though. You can look at a man like Pemberton and still see his humanity." "Everyone deserves compassion," Clara said, "even people who make terrible choices." They returned to White Pine and threw themselves back into the rhythms of ranch life. Thomas was 8 now and taking on more responsibilities around the property. The twins, 6 years old, were attending the small school that had been established in town. Samuel, at 2, was a whirlwind of energy who kept Clara constantly on her toes. As the 1880s drew to a close, Nathan and Clara often found themselves reflecting on how far they had come. The frightened widow and the drifting cowboy had built an empire of sorts, not measured in dollars and cents, but in love and family and community. Their ranch was one of the most successful in the region. Their children were healthy and happy, and their marriage was stronger than ever. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked Nathan one night as they lay in bed. "Giving up that money, staying here instead of continuing to drift?" Nathan propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with an expression of complete incredulity. "Regret it? Clara, meeting you and building this life with you is the best thing that ever happened to me. I would give up 1,000 times that amount if it meant I got to spend my days with you. I just want to make sure you are happy," Clara said softly. "You gave up so much for me." "I gave up nothing," Nathan insisted. "Or rather, I gave up a lonely, purposeless existence in exchange for everything that matters. You, our children, this ranch, the life we have built together. This is what I was meant for, Clara. I see that now. All those years of drifting were just leading me to your door." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Even after all these years, Nathan could still make her feel like the most cherished woman in the world. "I love you so much." "And I love you," Nathan replied, kissing her tenderly. "I always will." As the new decade began, the Olsen family continued to thrive. In 1891, Clara gave birth to their 5th and final child, a daughter they named Rose after Mrs. Henderson's daughter, who had stood up with Clara at her wedding. Rose was a surprise, arriving when Clara was 39 years old and had assumed her childbearing years were behind her, but she was welcomed with as much joy and love as her siblings. Thomas was 11 now, and showing real skill as a rancher. Nathan began teaching him the business side of operations, wanting to ensure his son understood not just how to work the land, but how to manage it profitably and sustainably. The twins, at 9, were becoming young ladies, though they still preferred playing outside to sitting quietly with needlework. Samuel, at 7, was showing an interest in horses and spent every spare moment in the barn. The ranch had grown to nearly 200 acres, and Nathan employed 6 full-time ranch hands plus seasonal workers during busy times like calving and branding. They had diversified beyond just cattle, breeding horses that were becoming known throughout Nevada for their strength and temperament. The Olsen brand was respected and recognized, a symbol of quality and fair dealing. Clara had become something of a pillar in the White Pine community. She had helped establish a proper school, served on the church council, and organized aid for families facing hardship. People came to her for advice, for help, for a sympathetic ear. She had transformed from a desperate widow into a woman of influence and respect. But through it all, what mattered most to Clara was her family. Every evening when Nathan came in from the range, dusty and tired, and kissed her hello. Every morning when she woke to the sounds of her children beginning their day. Every Sunday when they all piled into the wagon to go to church, the girls in their good dresses and the boys in their uncomfortable collars. These were the moments Clara treasured, the ordinary, everyday moments that made up a life well lived. One afternoon in the summer of 1895, as Clara sat on the porch watching Nathan teach Samuel how to rope a fence post, she reflected on the 17 years that had passed since that terrible day when Silas Pemberton had threatened to take her home. So much had changed. She had changed. The frightened young widow had grown into a confident woman, a mother, a respected member of her community. And it had all started because one man had been willing to help a stranger. Nathan looked up from his lesson and caught her watching. He smiled, that brilliant smile that still made her heart skip a beat after all these years, and Clara smiled back. She thought about all the people who had told her it was too soon to remarry after Thomas died, who had warned her not to trust a stranger, who had predicted that a marriage built on such unusual circumstances could never last. They had all been wrong. What she and Nathan had built was not just lasting, but thriving, growing stronger with each passing year. Their love had deepened from those first tentative feelings into something profound and unshakable, a partnership that enhanced every aspect of their lives. That evening, after the children were in bed, Clara and Nathan took their customary walk around the property. It was something they had been doing for years, a way to check on things, and also to have some quiet time together. The summer air was warm and smelled of grass and cattle and the wild sage that grew on the hillsides. "Thomas is going to make a fine rancher," Nathan observed as they walked. "He has a good head for the business and a real connection with the animals." "He learned from the best," Clara said, squeezing Nathan's hand. "You have been a wonderful teacher to him." "I just want to make sure he is prepared to take over when the time comes," Nathan said. "Not that I am planning on going anywhere anytime soon, but eventually this will all be his to manage." "And the twins and Samuel and Rose?" Clara asked. "What about them?" "The ranch will support all of them if they want to stay," Nathan said. "But I also want them to know they have choices. If Emma wants to go to a teaching college, or if Grace decides she wants to be a doctor, or if Samuel wants to start his own place, they should be able to do that." Clara leaned her head on Nathan's shoulder as they walked. "You are a good father. Did I ever tell you that?" "Maybe once or twice," Nathan teased. "But I never get tired of hearing it." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. When they reached the top of the small rise that overlooked the entire ranch, they stopped to take in the view. The house stood solid and welcoming, lamplight glowing in the windows. The barn and outbuildings were in excellent repair. The pastures were full of healthy cattle and horses. Beyond it all, the mountains rose dark against the star-filled sky. "Look at what we built," Clara said softly. "When I think about where we started and where we are now, it almost does not seem real." "It is real," Nathan assured her. "Every bit of it. We worked hard, we made smart choices, and we loved each other through the tough times. This is what we earned, Clara. We deserve this happiness." "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not stopped at my door that morning?" Clara asked. "If you had just ridden past and gone to find the blacksmith on your own?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I think about it sometimes," he admitted. "And it terrifies me, because my life without you in it would have been so much emptier. I would have kept drifting, kept running from one place to another, never finding what I was looking for, because I did not even know what I needed. You gave me purpose, Clara. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Clara corrected. She turned to face him, reaching up to cup his cheek. "I was broken when you found me, Nathan. I thought my life was over, but you showed me that there could be a second chance, that love could come when you least expected it. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." Nathan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in an embrace that felt like home. "Then I guess we were both lost until we found each other. I guess we were, Clara agreed. They stood there on the hilltop, holding each other under the vast Nevada sky, two people who had been brought together by circumstance, but who had chosen each other every day since. Their love story had not been conventional. It had started with a debt and a generous stranger, and a choice to take a leap of faith. But it had become something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of kindness and courage, and opening your heart to possibility. As the years continued to pass, the Olsen family remained a fixture in White Pine. Thomas took over more and more of the daily operations of the ranch, proving himself to be as capable and fair-minded as his father. At 19, he married a local girl named Sarah, and they began their own family in a house Nathan and Clara built for them on the far corner of the property. The twins went their separate ways, as different in their paths as they were identical in appearance. Emma, true to her bold nature, left Nevada to attend a teaching college in California, eventually returning to White Pine to establish the town's first proper school building. Grace surprised everyone by developing an interest in ranching and partnered with her brother Thomas, handling the business and financial side of operations while he managed the cattle and land. Samuel did exactly what Nathan had predicted, taking his inheritance at 21 and purchasing land of his own nearby, starting a horse ranch that quickly became known throughout the West. Rose, the baby of the family, showed artistic talent and spent several years studying in San Francisco before returning home to paint landscapes of the Nevada wilderness that sold to collectors throughout the country. Through it all, Nathan and Clara remained the heart of the family, their enduring love providing a model for their children and grandchildren. They grew older together, Nathan's dark hair going silver, Clara's face developing the lines that came from years of smiling, but their love never dimmed, never faded, never became ordinary or expected. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1907, their children and grandchildren gathered at the main ranch house for a celebration. There were now 12 grandchildren ranging from newborn to 8 years old, and the house was filled with noise and laughter and love. As Clara looked around at the crowded room, at her children grown and successful, at her grandchildren playing on the floor, at Nathan standing by the fireplace telling stories to a captivated audience, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This life, this family, this love, it had all sprung from one moment of crisis and one act of incredible generosity. "Grandmother," said Emma's daughter Elizabeth, tugging on Clara's skirt, "will you tell us the story again, about how grandfather saved the ranch?" Clara smiled down at the 6-year-old, seeing her own green eyes reflected back at her. "Again? I told you just last week." "But it is the best story," Elizabeth insisted. "Please?" Clara glanced over at Nathan, who was watching her with a soft smile. He nodded encouragingly, and Clara lifted Elizabeth onto her lap, the other children gathering around to listen. "Well," Clara began, her voice taking on the cadence of a well-worn tale, "it was a very difficult time. Your great-grandfather Thomas had passed away, and I was all alone trying to hold on to this ranch. A bad man named Silas Pemberton wanted to take my home away from me, and I did not know what to do." "And then grandfather came," one of the boys said excitedly. "And then grandfather came," Clara agreed. "He was just passing through town, a cowboy on his way to nowhere in particular. But he saw that I needed help, and even though we were strangers, he chose to stay. He paid off my debt, he helped fix up the ranch, and eventually—" "You fell in love," Elizabeth finished dramatically, making the other children giggle. "We fell in love," Clara confirmed, her eyes finding Nathan's across the room. "And we built all of this together. This ranch, this family, this life. All because your grandfather was the kind of man who stopped to help someone in need." Nathan crossed the room and put his hand on Clara's shoulder, squeezing gently. "And because your grandmother was brave enough to accept help from a stranger, and strong enough to build something beautiful from the ashes of her loss." The children looked between their grandparents, seeing the love that still shone so clearly between them even after 3 decades. It was a lesson they would carry with them throughout their lives, that true love endures, that kindness matters, that courage in the face of adversity can lead to blessings beyond imagination. As the celebration continued into the evening, Clara and Nathan found a quiet moment alone on the porch, the same porch where they had shared so many conversations over the years. 30 years, Clara marveled. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have been together forever. "Both things can be true," Nathan said, pulling her close. "Every day with you feels new and exciting. but I also cannot remember what life was like before you were in it." "We have been lucky," Clara said. "We have been blessed," Nathan corrected. "And we have worked hard. Luck is what brought me to your door that morning, but everything that came after was choice and effort and love." Clara rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Do you have any regrets? Anything you wish had been different?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, genuinely considering the question. "No," he finally said. "Not a single thing. This life we built, this family we created, the love we have shared, I would not change any of it. Every challenge we faced made us stronger. Every joy we celebrated brought us closer. I am exactly where I want to be, with exactly who I want to be with." "Me too," Clara whispered. "Me too." They stood together in the gathering darkness, the sounds of their family drifting out through the windows behind them. Inside, their children were putting together a meal, their grandchildren were playing games, their legacy was continuing. It was everything Clara had never dared to dream of when she was a frightened widow facing the loss of her home. And it had all started with a knock on the door and a cowboy willing to help. As the night grew deeper and the stars emerged one by one in the vast Nevada sky, Clara thought about all the people whose lives had been touched by the choice Nathan made that morning in 1877. Their children, who had grown up secure and loved, their grandchildren, who would carry forward the values of kindness and integrity, the community of White Pine, which had been enriched by their presence and their generosity, all of it rippling out from that one moment of decision. "Thank you," Clara said quietly. "For what?" Nathan asked. "For knocking on my door, for offering to help, for staying, for loving me, for everything." Nathan kissed the top of her head, his arms tightening around her. "Thank you for opening the door, for trusting me, for building this life with me, for loving me back." They stood there together, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen each other every day for 30 years, who would continue to choose each other for whatever time they had left. Their love story was not the kind told in fairy tales. There had been no love at first sight, no grand romantic gestures, no easy path to happiness. But it was real, and it was enduring, and it was theirs. And in the end, that was all that mattered. They had taken a moment of crisis and transformed it into a lifetime of love. They had taken a business transaction and turned it into a partnership that enriched every aspect of their existence. They had taken a chance on each other, and that chance had paid off beyond either of their wildest dreams. As the celebration wound down and their children began gathering up sleepy grandchildren to head home, Clara and Nathan remained on the porch, reluctant to let the evening end. These family gatherings were becoming more precious as they grew older, each one a treasure to be savored. "Do you think we will have many more anniversaries like this?" Clara asked, voicing the thought that had been hovering at the edges of her mind all evening. "As many as we are blessed to have," Nathan replied honestly. "We are both getting on in years, Clara, but whatever time we have left, we will spend it together, surrounded by the family we created and the love we built." "That is all I need," Clara said. "Just you and this life for as long as possible." "You will always have me," Nathan promised, "in this life and whatever comes after. You are written on my soul, Clara Olson. Nothing can ever change that." They finally went inside as the night grew cold, banking the fire and checking that everything was secure before heading upstairs to their bedroom. As Clara changed into her nightgown and Nathan extinguished the lamps, she felt the same contentment she felt every night, the deep satisfaction of a day well lived, a life well built, a love well tended. She climbed into bed beside the man who had been her partner, her friend, her lover, and her greatest blessing for 3 decades. Nathan pulled her close, their bodies fitting together with the ease of long practice, and Clara smiled in the darkness. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Nathan replied, "today, tomorrow, and always." And as they drifted off to sleep, Clara's last thought before dreams claimed her was one of gratitude for the loan that had brought them together, for the cowboy who had paid it, for the deed she had kept, and most of all, for the love they had found in the most unexpected of circumstances. It was a love that had stood the test of time, weathered every storm, and emerged stronger and more beautiful with each passing year. In the morning, there would be work to do, grandchildren to spoil, a ranch to run, and a life to continue living. But for now, in the quiet peace of their bedroom, with the man she loved beside her and the legacy they had built all around them, Clara was completely and utterly content. The moneylender had wanted her home as payment. The cowboy had paid the loan and let her keep the deed. And in doing so, he had given her so much more than just a house. He had given her a future, a family, and a love that would echo through generations. It was, Clara thought, as sleep finally claimed her, the very best kind of ending, and the very best kind of beginning, too.